Hi, welcome to 2020 Tasty Treats with GourmetQuilter. We're having a lot of fun with all sorts of different things throughout the year this year, and currently we're doing a whole 20 days of foundation piece blocks. So there's a picture here showing the 20 blocks. They're also on the website on GourmetQuilter.com, where there's more information, and that you can sign up and register to receive the blocks if you'd like to do that yourself and make all these blocks. So we've been going through, as I said, there's going to be 20 different blocks. We've already made quite a few. We've made 13. So we're on to day 14 today. So these are coming up really nicely. They're just a lot of fun to do the foundation piecing. We're piecing onto foundation papers. So if you're receiving the pattern, you'll have a printable pattern that looks like this, so that you can cut out all your segments, because the blocks are often made in segments. So this is the block we're doing today, block 14, and it's a little set of 3 townhouses. One's wider to a narrow to a shorter, one's taller, all those sorts of things. So we just, again, there's segments, so there's 6 different segments. So I'm just going to run through making really just the part of one of the segments, because a lot of it we've already covered in previous videos. So I've already made 5 of the 6 segments. So I've made the centre slightly larger house, I've made the side one and its little roof, and I've made the roof for the other one. So the other one I'm just going to run through here, and I have already started it. The pieces are quite tiny, so I just thought I'd go through how we're handling really small pieces like that. Even though we have done some of this before, I just thought it would be good to go through it again. So I've already put the door. The door goes on first. You do the centre. I'll show you on this one. You do this centre column first, and then you put your sides on. So the door is piece 1, and then a little piece of the wall. I'm having a nice orangey coloured house. Wonderful. You can paint your houses whatever colour you like. This is a window, the yellow, and now I need another little bit above. So that piece 3 here is the window. So now I need to put piece 4 on, which is the top bit of wall above the window. So I've got obviously very oversized pieces here. It's not easy to work with such tiny pieces, and really these are just small amounts of fabric, and it's such a great way to use up some leftover bits and pieces of fabrics and all sorts of colors. It's such a good idea, I think. So I'm just stitching, so I'm starting the stitching just before the line and finishing just after, but right on that little short line there. And that's all that little seam is, just a tiny little seam. But otherwise much the same. I'm flipping back and I'm trimming off my seam allowance, and I'm going to press that. And I find in particular with these tiny pieces, pressing actually helps even more than on the larger pieces, because they just want to sort of buckle around otherwise, because fabric doesn't necessarily want to be pressed and be controlled like that. So now I've done all of my, this is my door, wall, window, door. So now we need the side wall pieces put on. And so I've got a strip ready here. So just to make sure that we're putting things in the right place, we can fold back along the line that we're going to sew. Oops. And position that piece there behind. So just make sure it's long enough to go out to the seam allowances, and then we can just let that come back over, because we know that that's going to be big enough to flip over to make the side wall piece and the seam allowance. So I'll just stitch up there. Make sure things don't move around too much. And then because I've sewn these little seams across, I'll have caught them on the paper because we've sewn into that little area a bit. Just pull that away, fold it back on the stitched line, and just trim off that seam. And then I'll bring the iron over. So if you've been watching the other videos, you'll see that this is really no different. We're just achieving some of what is very hard to achieve without the foundation piecing, with these tiny little pieces in here. It is very often possible, but not easy to do tiny piecing without a foundation. So same thing, I'm going to put the next wall on. I can actually see end to end because my piece of fabric is just long enough to do that with. And then there's also on this particular one, there's a little piece of the background for the side as well, so that's got to fit in there too. So make sure you're lining up with the right line, and I was not. That'll teach me to think I know what I'm doing. Hey. So this is where I'm going. It's long enough to cover my pieces. It's on my stitching line now, covered, and so I'm just going to stitch that down now. So really that's only 1/4 of an inch wide, that little piece in between with the door and the window, so quite small to be working with. So these foundations do make it easier. Pulling apart any stitching I've done so I can fold the paper back on the stitching line, trim up my seam. Just doing that, pressing, almost ready for trimming up. We've got these tiny little pieces in there, but we've still got a strip like this one here. We've got a little bit of background down the side, so we've got one more strip to go on before we can trim that up, and it goes on this side over here. It's the last piece, so I can just position that ready, making sure it's plenty long enough. Stitch down my seam line. And fold the paper back and trim off that little bit of seam allowance. And press that, and then we can trim and have a look at how this block goes together. So it's looking pretty good so far, or it's going to look even better soon. So just trimming on the dotted lines. So there's my little house. So if we're setting the block out, it's got a little roof. Actually, this is the roof for that house because it's got a little space above. This is the shorter house. The centre house is the wider one. And the other side house is a bit taller than this house. And then this roof will go over the top. So what we need to do is put this roof onto this house and this roof onto this house. And then the houses will all be the same height, and we can join the 3 houses together, and then the big roof goes on right across the top of the block. So I might get started on that and show you how progress is going. So I've gone ahead and I've put 2 of the houses together. So I'd put this roof with the extra bit on it on top of that little house. I've joined that together. So when I press this seam open, and then I also pulled out some of the little paper behind the seam so that when I did this next seam it wasn't going to be in the way. And then I've actually pressed that seam into the centre house because it kind of wanted to sit there. So we've just got one more house to go on. You can see how it makes the difference. You lose all this extra bit in the seam allowance, which suddenly makes everything look right. So I'll go ahead and sew that. I've pulled out the paper again from just that little part of the seam. I had pressed that little seam open there. I'll stitch this down. So satisfying to see these little blocks coming together. So I'm going to bring the iron over, and again I'm going to press that seam into the centre house. And now there's just the roof to go on, so I might as well do that as well, and we can see the block finished. And I think I'm going to probably press that seam open. It's got a couple of things going on and it gets a little bit bulky. So there we have our little townhouse block all finished. I just think they're coming up so nicely. I possibly like these more than I like some other things in life now. So this is going to go up here, and that's block 14 all finished. So much fun to get these all done. And we've still got a few more to go yet though. So don't forget, we've got to take all the papers out. Remember, when we take the papers out, we're going to be tearing them out and some sort of a little water spritzer that you can spray the paper with to soften it. That helps the papers come away, but you do have to still sit and pull them out little bit by little bit. So that was block 14, and we'll see you again. Thank you for block 15.